At exactly 6:12 in the morning, the sound of chains rattling outside shattered the silence of Willow Creek Estates. Most residents were still asleep. The sky was gray. Sprinklers clicked across perfect green lawns. Birds chirped peacefully. But in front of house number 42, chaos had already begun. A large repo truck blocked the driveway while two men hooked chains onto a black Dodge Charger. The car looked intimidating even parked. Dark tinted windows, heavy-duty tires, custom grille. It wasn't the kind of vehicle most people ignored. Yet standing proudly across the street with folded arms was Karen Holloway, president of the Willow Creek HOA. Karen wore an expensive beige coat and carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. And right now, she looked extremely satisfied. About time, she muttered. Karen had spent 3 straight weeks complaining about the Charger. According to her, the vehicle violated HOA appearance standards. Too aggressive, too dark, too suspicious. She called it a criminal-looking car. The owner, a quiet man named Marcus Reed, ignored every warning letter. That only made Karen angrier, because Karen hated being ignored. She controlled Willow Creek through intimidation, trash can violations, mailbox citations, grass inspections, parking threats. Residents feared her more than local police. And Karen loved it. But Marcus Reed was different. He rarely spoke, never attended HOA meetings, never argued. He simply parked the Charger in his driveway every night and disappeared before sunrise. Karen became obsessed. She told neighbors he was suspicious. Men like that don't belong here, she whispered repeatedly. Nobody really knew Marcus, but they knew Karen, and Karen always needed a target. 3 days earlier, Karen finally snapped after spotting the Charger parked overnight with mud on the tires. She marched directly into the HOA office demanding action. "I want that vehicle removed immediately," she ordered. One board member looked confused. "Karen, we can fine him, but we can't just tow a resident's car without legal cause." Karen smirked. "Then we'll fine cause." And somehow, she did. Karen contacted a private repossession company claiming the vehicle had abandoned status and unresolved registration issues. She exaggerated, manipulated paperwork, used HOA authority aggressively, and now the repo crew was taking the Charger. One worker looked uncertain. "You sure this is legal?" Karen handed him printed forms. "Completely authorized." The worker shrugged. Money was money. Across the street, curtains started opening. Residents peeked outside nervously. A teenager quietly recorded video on his phone. Because whenever Karen caused drama, something bad usually followed. Then the front door of house number 42 opened. Marcus Reed stepped outside, and instantly, the atmosphere changed. Marcus was tall, broad shoulders, calm expression, the kind of man who made people instinctively stop talking. He looked at the repo truck, then at Karen. No panic, no yelling, just silence. Karen smiled smugly. "Good morning," she said sweetly. Marcus slowly walked down the driveway. "What's happening?" Karen lifted her clipboard proudly. "Your vehicle is being removed due to HOA violations and registration concerns." Marcus stared at her for several seconds, then asked calmly, "Did you authorize this?" Karen tilted her head. "As HOA president, I authorize appropriate enforcement action." The repo driver shifted nervously. Something about Marcus felt wrong, too calm. Marcus looked toward the Charger, unhooked the car. Karen laughed instantly. "Oh, now you want to cooperate." Marcus ignored her. He looked directly at the repo driver. "Unhook the vehicle." The driver hesitated. Karen snapped, "Do not listen to him." Marcus reached slowly into his jacket. Several neighbors gasped, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a badge. Not local police. Something else. The repo driver's face immediately changed. "Oh, hell." Karen frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Marcus stepped closer. "Detective Marcus Reed, Metro Organized Crime Task Force." The entire street went silent. Karen blinked. "What?" Marcus continued calmly. "And this vehicle is registered under an active undercover operation." The repo driver immediately dropped the chain. "You told us this was abandoned," he yelled at Karen. Karen's confident smile disappeared. Marcus stared directly at her. Do you understand what happens when civilians interfere with undercover law enforcement property? Karen's face lost color instantly. One neighbor whispered, "Oh my God!" Marcus pulled out his phone. Karen suddenly panicked. Now, wait a minute. Marcus ignored her. Yes, he said into the phone. I need internal affairs and county supervisors notified immediately. Karen's knees nearly buckled. The repo workers started unhitching the charger as fast as possible. One of them looked furious. You lied to us. Karen pointed desperately. I was protecting the neighborhood. Marcus finally looked directly at her. No, he said coldly. You were abusing power. And suddenly, Karen realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Because this wasn't just somebody's car. This was evidence tied to an undercover criminal investigation. And now, the entire operation might be compromised. The peaceful image of Willow Creek Estates collapsed before breakfast. By 8 a.m., residents crowded sidewalks whispering nervously while county police vehicles rolled into the neighborhood. Karen stood frozen beside the clubhouse entrance, watching officers speak with Marcus Reed. For the first time in years, she looked afraid. Not annoyed, not angry, afraid. Because Karen finally understood something terrifying. Marcus Reed wasn't just a quiet homeowner. He was law enforcement. And not ordinary law enforcement. Undercover. That changed everything. An officer approached Karen holding a notepad. We need a statement regarding the unauthorized repossession attempt. Karen forced a nervous laugh. There's been a misunderstanding. The officer remained expressionless. Did you authorize a removal? Karen swallowed hard. I acted under HOA authority. The officer wrote something down, then asked the question Karen dreaded. Did you knowingly submit false property information to the repossession company? Karen's eyes widened. I didn't lie. But her voice lacked confidence. Across the street, residents watched everything unfold. And for once, nobody rushed to defend Karen, because everyone knew how she operated. Manipulation, threats, selective enforcement. Most people simply stayed quiet because fighting Karen usually made life worse. But now, Karen had targeted the wrong person. Inside his garage, Marcus inspected the Charger carefully. The vehicle wasn't just transportation. It contained sensitive surveillance equipment hidden throughout the interior, encrypted communication devices, tracking systems, evidence compartments. One wrong tow, one damaged panel. An entire undercover operation could collapse. A county supervisor entered the garage. How compromised are we? Marcus looked serious. Too early to know. Then he added quietly, but word spreads fast. That was the real danger. Organized crime investigations depended on secrecy. And thanks to Karen's public HOA stunt, the entire neighborhood now knew Marcus was law enforcement. Outside, Karen paced furiously. This is ridiculous, she snapped at a board member. How was I supposed to know he was undercover? The board member stared at her. Maybe because it wasn't your job to repo people's cars. Karen looked stunned, because even her own board was turning against her. Then another resident stepped forward, an older veteran named Frank. You always push too far, he said calmly. Karen glared. You don't understand neighborhood standards. Frank laughed bitterly. No, you don't understand boundaries. Karen crossed her arms defensively. That car looks suspicious. Frank pointed toward Marcus's house. And now you've got actual detectives investigating this neighborhood because you couldn't mind your own business. Karen looked around desperately, but nobody supported her anymore. Not after seeing police flood the community. Not after hearing words like undercover operation. Inside the clubhouse, Marcus sat with investigators reviewing timelines. One detective looked frustrated. We may need to shut the operation down. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Months of work, surveillance, confidential meetings, all potentially destroyed because of one power-hungry HOA president. The detective leaned closer. You think this was just HOA behavior? Marcus paused. That question mattered, because something about Karen's obsession felt unusual. Too aggressive, too personal. Marcus remembered every warning letter, every complaint, every strange encounter. Then he remembered something else. Karen repeatedly asked neighbors questions about his schedule, when he left, when he returned, who visited. At first it seemed like normal HOA harassment. Now, it felt different, potentially dangerous. Marcus leaned back slowly. I want financial records on the HOA. The detective frowned. You think there's more here? Marcus looked toward the window where Karen argued outside. I think people obsessed with control usually hide something. Meanwhile, Karen retreated into the clubhouse office. She locked the door and immediately started making phone calls. Lawyers, board members, anyone who might help. But nobody sounded confident anymore. Then Karen opened social media. Big mistake. Videos from the morning incident already spread across local community pages. HOA president tries repoing undercover detective car. Thousands of views. Thousands. Comments flooded nonstop. She finally messed with the wrong person. That HOA sounds insane. Imagine abusing power like this. Karen threw her phone onto the desk. Her perfect image was collapsing publicly. And it got worse. Around noon, 2 black SUVs quietly entered Willow Creek. No police logos. No markings. But Marcus recognized them immediately. Federal Task Force supervisors. Karen watched nervously from inside the clubhouse as serious-looking men entered Marcus's house. Her stomach dropped. Federal? This wasn't some local misunderstanding anymore. One resident whispered, what exactly was that detective investigating? Nobody knew, but suddenly the neighborhood felt different. Dangerous. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked toward the clubhouse. Karen spotted him through the window, and panic hit instantly. Marcus entered calmly. Karen stood defensively. If you're here to threaten me. Marcus interrupted quietly. You expose an undercover officer publicly. Karen folded her arms. You should have informed the HOA. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. That's not how undercover work functions. Karen looked away. Marcus stepped closer. Do you realize how many operations fail because civilians interfere? Karen tried sounding confident again. I was protecting property values. Marcus nodded slowly. Interesting. Then he placed a document on her desk. Karen looked down. Her face changed instantly. Search authorization request. 4 HOA financial records. Karen looked back up sharply. You can't investigate the HOA because of a towing mistake. Marcus responded calmly. Maybe not. Then he lowered his voice. But people who abuse small amounts of power often abuse larger systems too. Karen's hands trembled slightly, because suddenly, she wasn't worried about the car anymore. She was worried about what investigators might find. And deep down, Karen knew there were things hidden inside HOA records nobody else knew about. Things that could destroy her completely. 2 days after the failed repossession, Willow Creek Estates became a media circus. News vans parked outside the entrance. Residents whispered nonstop. Online video spread across the state. And Karen Holloway stopped leaving her house unless absolutely necessary. For years she controlled the neighborhood through fear. Now the entire community watched her unravel. But the real disaster hadn't even started yet. Inside the county investigations office, Detective Marcus Reed sat reviewing HOA financial documents with forensic auditors. Stacks of files covered the conference table. Payment records, violation notices, legal fee reports, special assessment collections. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then the auditors started noticing patterns. Missing approvals, duplicate fines, unauthorized charges. One auditor frowned deeply. These numbers don't add up. Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean? The auditor tapped several pages. Thousands of dollars labeled as emergency enforcement expenses. Marcus studied the records. Where did the money go? The auditor sighed. That's a problem. No clear documentation existed. Just vague transfers, repeatedly authorized under Karen's signature. Meanwhile, back in Willow Creek, residents gathered outside mailboxes exchanging stories. Once people stopped fearing Karen, they started talking openly. One family revealed they paid nearly $15,000 in penalties over landscaping disputes. An elderly widow admitted Karen threatened foreclosure after delayed HOA dues during medical treatment. Another resident claimed Karen targeted homeowners she personally disliked. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Karen didn't enforce rules equally. She weaponized them. That evening, Marcus visited an elderly resident named Eleanor Brooks. Eleanor requested a meeting privately. The 80-year-old woman opened the door slowly. "I have something you need to see," she whispered. Inside her living room sat old HOA paperwork stored in boxes. Years of records. Karen's name appeared everywhere. Eleanor adjusted her glasses nervously. "I used to help with bookkeeping before Karen pushed me out." Marcus listened carefully. Eleanor lowered her voice. She always controlled the money. Then she handed Marcus a faded folder. Inside were photocopies, transfers, account discrepancies, personal reimbursements. Marcus's expression hardened. Karen allegedly used HOA funds for personal expenses, luxury travel, spa charges, furniture purchases, all disguised as community administrative costs. Marcus looked stunned. How long has this been happening? Eleanor sighed sadly. "Years." Then she looked down. Most residents were too scared to challenge her. Marcus understood immediately. Bullies thrive when people feel powerless. And Karen spent years making residents afraid. The next morning, investigators officially requested expanded financial audits. That's when Karen truly panicked. Inside her kitchen, she paced while speaking frantically with a lawyer. "They're overreacting," she snapped. The lawyer sounded concerned. "Karen, did you personally approve reimbursements without board authorization?" Karen hesitated, then answered defensively. "I handled operational decisions efficiently." The silence on the phone felt dangerous. Her lawyer finally spoke carefully. "You need to prepare for potential fraud inquiries." Karen nearly dropped the phone. Fraud? She never imagined things would escalate this far. In Karen's mind, she wasn't corrupt. She simply believed she deserved control, deserved benefits, deserved authority, deserved obedience. That mindset destroyed her. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked through Willow Creek quietly. Residents approached constantly now, not afraid, grateful. A father shook his hand. "You finally stood up to her." Marcus smiled politely, but he understood something important. This wasn't really about him. The neighborhood had suffered for years. People simply needed someone strong enough to challenge Karen publicly. Then Marcus noticed something strange. Karen's SUV suddenly pulled out of a driveway quickly. Too quickly. She looked nervous. Marcus watched carefully. Instinct kicked in. Years undercover taught him one thing. People running from investigations usually run toward hidden problems. Marcus quietly entered his Charger and followed. Karen drove across town to a private storage facility. Marcus parked at a distance. Karen hurried inside carrying 2 large boxes. That immediately raised alarms. 20 minutes later, county investigators arrived. Because Marcus already requested surveillance support, Karen exited the facility looking pale, then froze. Investigators approached calmly. One detective spoke first. "We need access to the storage unit." Karen's face drained of color. "You can't do that." The detective lifted a warrant. Actually, they could. Inside the storage unit, investigators discovered exactly what Karen feared. Boxes filled with HOA financial documents, hidden records, deleted complaints, resident disputes, unauthorized reimbursement receipts. And one discovery shocked everyone. A private notebook. Karen personally tracked residents she disliked. Beside names were handwritten comments. Single mother, easy pressure target. Elderly couple likely won't fight back. Veteran always intimidated by legal threats. Marcus stared at the pages silently. This wasn't simple HOA overreach. Karen intentionally targeted vulnerable residents. One investigator muttered, "This woman treated the neighborhood like a personal kingdom." Karen sat handcuffed beside a patrol vehicle watching investigators carry boxes away. And suddenly, the woman who spent years controlling others had completely lost control herself. Residents heard the news within hours. The neighborhood exploded, not with celebration, with disbelief. People finally realized how deeply Karen manipulated the community. That evening, Marcus sat quietly inside his garage looking at the Charger. The car Karen tried repoing. The mistake that exposed everything. One detective walked in smiling. You realize none of this happens if she leaves your car alone. Marcus nodded slowly. Funny how power works. Karen believed she could intimidate anyone, but arrogance blinded her. And the moment she targeted someone she couldn't control, her entire empire collapsed. By the following week, Willow Creek Estates looked completely different. Not physically, emotionally. For years, the neighborhood felt tense. Residents avoided conflict, avoided HOA meetings, avoided Karen. Now people stood outside talking openly, smiling more, breathing easier, because a fear that controlled Willow Creek was finally disappearing. And as investigators uncovered more evidence, residents became bolder. The emergency HOA meeting scheduled that Thursday became the most crowded event in neighborhood history. Every seat filled. People lined the walls. Neighbors stood outside listening through open windows. But the biggest shock, Karen wasn't sitting at the front anymore. Instead, she entered quietly beside her attorney. No confident smile, no clipboard, no arrogant attitude, just panic. Residents watched silently as she sat down. The board chairman cleared his throat nervously. As everyone knows, he began, county investigations regarding HOA misconduct ongoing. Whispers spread instantly. The chairman continued, tonight we'll discuss interim leadership and resident concerns. Immediately, hands shot into the air. For years, nobody dared speak against Karen. Now everyone wanted the microphone. A retired teacher stood first. My husband died last year, she said emotionally. Karen threatened liens against my home while I was handling funeral expenses. Gasps filled the room. Then another resident stepped forward. She fined us repeatedly during our son's cancer treatments. Another, and she denied accessibility requests for my disabled father. Story after story flooded the clubhouse. Marcus sat quietly near the back observing. This wasn't anger anymore. It was release. Years of silence finally breaking. Karen shifted uncomfortably beside her lawyer. Then an elderly veteran named Harold stood slowly. The room immediately quieted. Harold rarely spoke at meetings. But tonight, his voice carried weight. I fought overseas for 22 years, he said calmly, and I never expected to feel bullied inside my own neighborhood afterward. Karen looked down. Harold pointed toward her. You used rules like weapons. Nobody disagreed. The board chairman sighed heavily. Then he made the announcement everyone expected. Effective immediately, Karen Holloway is suspended from all HOA authority pending investigation results. Applause erupted instantly. Not cruel applause. Relieved applause. Karen stood abruptly. This is insanity. But nobody looked intimidated anymore. A woman near the front shouted, No, what's insane is what you did to this neighborhood. Karen pointed angrily. You people loved me when property values were high. Marcus finally stood. The room became silent immediately, because after everything that happened, people respected him, not because he was law enforcement, because he stayed calm while exposing the truth. Marcus looked directly at Karen. Property values don't matter if residents live in fear. Karen's lawyer whispered something urgently, but Karen ignored him. You ruined my life over a car, she yelled. Marcus answered quietly, No. Then he gestured around the room. You ruined it yourself when you decided power mattered more than people. The room erupted in applause again. Karen looked around desperately, but the support she once enjoyed was gone, because it was never real respect. It was fear disguised as obedience. Meanwhile, investigators continued uncovering more financial problems, unauthorized collections, missing reserve funds, selective enforcement schemes. The deeper they dug, the uglier things became. Outside the clubhouse after the meeting, residents gathered around Marcus. One man laughed nervously. Honestly, I thought you were some kind of criminal when you first moved in. Marcus smirked slightly. That was technically part of the job. Several neighbors laughed for the first time in weeks. Then an elderly woman stepped forward. You know what's funny? She said softly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She smiled warmly. The undercover detective turned out to be the safest person in the neighborhood. Marcus laughed quietly. Across the parking lot, Karen sat alone inside her SUV watching residents talk happily. And that hurt more than the investigation. because for years she believed the neighborhood needed her control. Now people looked happier without her. That realization crushed her ego. Then her attorney entered the passenger seat. "We need to discuss potential criminal exposure." Karen looked sick. The attorney continued carefully. "The financial record is serious." Karen stared ahead silently. "And the detective," she whispered. The lawyer sighed. "Interfering with undercover operations complicates everything." Karen closed her eyes. One stupid decision, one reckless abuse of power, and her entire world collapsed. Meanwhile, Marcus returned home quietly. He stood in his driveway staring at the black Charger. The same car Karen called suspicious. The same car she tried removing publicly. Funny enough, that single act exposed years of corruption hidden beneath Willow Creek's perfect appearance. A young boy riding a bicycle slowed nearby. "Hey, detective." Marcus smiled. "Yeah." The boy grinned. "My mom says you saved the neighborhood." Marcus looked around the peaceful street, then answered honestly, "No." He nodded toward the nearby homes. The neighborhood saved itself once people stopped being afraid. The criminal investigation into Karen Holloway expanded faster than anyone expected. What started as a reckless HOA repossession disaster became a full financial misconduct case. County auditors uncovered thousands of dollars in suspicious spending. Residents discovered years of hidden manipulation. And worst of all for Karen, former allies started cooperating with investigators. The board members who once stayed silent suddenly wanted protection. One after another, they handed over emails, internal memos, private messages, and those messages painted an ugly picture. Karen routinely pressured board members to target residents she personally disliked. Find them again. Threaten legal action. They'll eventually give up. The language shocked investigators. This wasn't leadership. It was intimidation. Meanwhile, local news stations covered the scandal nonstop. HOA president under investigation after undercover detective incident. Karen's face spread across television screens and social media feeds everywhere. The woman who once obsessed over neighborhood image now became public embarrassment herself. Inside her home, Karen barely slept. Curtains stayed closed. Phones rang constantly. Former friends stopped answering her calls. Even neighbors avoided eye contact. For the first time in years, Karen understood isolation. One evening, she finally snapped. She drove directly to the clubhouse during another resident meeting. People fell silent when she entered. Karen looked exhausted. Mascara smudged, hair messy, hand shaking, but anger still burned in her eyes. "You all turned against me," she shouted. Nobody responded immediately. The new interim board chairman stood carefully. "Karen." She interrupted loudly. "No, you people loved my leadership when this neighborhood looked perfect." An elderly resident answered quietly. "No, we feared your retaliation." Karen pointed angrily. "I protected property values." Then Marcus Reed entered through the clubhouse doors. The room instantly quieted. Karen's expression changed the moment she saw him. Rage, humiliation, fear. "You," she hissed. Marcus remained calm. Karen marched toward him. "This entire disaster started because of you." Marcus looked at her steadily. "No." Then he glanced around the room. "It started because you believed rules gave you power over people." Karen laughed bitterly. "You think you're some hero because you wear a badge." Marcus shook his head. "No." Then his voice hardened slightly. "But I know real authority isn't supposed to humiliate vulnerable people." The statement hit the room hard, because everyone knew exactly who Karen targeted. Widows, elderly residents, families struggling financially, people least able to fight back. Karen suddenly looked emotional. "You have no idea how much pressure I was under running this neighborhood." Marcus answered calmly. "Pressure reveals character." Silence filled the room. Karen looked around desperately, searching for support. But nobody defended her. Not anymore. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly widow named Patricia slowly approached Karen. Everyone watched nervously. Patricia spoke softly. "When my husband died, you threatened foreclosure over late HOA payments." Karen lowered her eyes. Patricia continued. "I cried for weeks because I thought I'd lose my home. The room became painfully quiet. Then Patricia asked a question nobody could answer. Why? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out, because deep down, there was no good answer. She liked control. That was the truth. Control made her feel powerful, and power became addictive. Karen suddenly looked smaller, not physically, emotionally, like someone finally stripped away the image she spent years building. Then county investigators entered the clubhouse. The atmosphere instantly changed. One investigator approached Karen directly. Ms. Holloway, we need to discuss additional financial findings. Karen looked terrified. The investigator continued quietly. We've identified and authorized transfers exceeding felony thresholds. Gasps spread across the room. Karen nearly lost balance. Felony? This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was potentially criminal. Karen whispered weakly, I never meant for this to happen. Marcus looked at her carefully, then answered honestly, most people who abuse power don't think consequences will ever reach them. The investigator gently guided Karen toward the exit. Nobody celebrated. Nobody cheered. Because despite everything, watching someone completely collapse still felt sad. Karen paused at the clubhouse doors, then looked back one final time. At the neighborhood she once controlled. At the residents she bullied. At the detective whose car she tried repoing. One reckless decision destroyed everything. And as Karen disappeared into the night with investigators, Willow Creek finally felt free. 3 months later, Willow Creek Estates barely resembled the neighborhood Karen once ruled. The tension was gone. Residents smiled more. Children played freely. Neighbors actually talked to one another again. The fear that once controlled the community disappeared completely. And surprisingly, property values improved more than ever. Because people finally understood something important. A healthy neighborhood isn't built through intimidation. It's built through trust. The HOA board underwent complete restructuring. Transparent voting. Open financial records. Fair enforcement policies. No more targeting vulnerable residents. No more threats. No more fear. Meanwhile, Karen Holloway officially faced multiple civil lawsuits and ongoing financial misconduct proceedings. Though details remained private, everyone knew her life changed forever. The woman who once acted untouchable lost everything because she couldn't stop abusing power. And it all started the morning she ordered a detective's car repossessed. One decision, one mistake, one massive consequence. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Willow Creek hosted its first real neighborhood picnic in years. Families filled the community park. Kids played football. Music drifted through the air. Barbecue smoke rose beneath clear blue skies. And for the first time, residents actually enjoyed being together. Near the basketball court, Detective Marcus Reed stood beside his black Charger holding a paper plate of food. Several neighbors gathered nearby laughing. Funny enough, the same car Karen called criminal-looking became almost legendary inside the neighborhood. A teenager grinned. So, what's actually hidden inside that thing? Marcus smirked. Nice try. Everyone laughed. Then an elderly veteran approached Marcus slowly. Frank, the same man Karen constantly harassed over minor violations. Frank extended his hand. I owe you thanks. Marcus shook it politely. You don't owe me anything. Frank smiled. Maybe not. Then he looked around the happy park. But this neighborhood needed someone willing to stand up. Marcus glanced across the community. Residents laughing. Neighbors talking. Children running freely. Then he answered quietly. People already wanted change. He smiled slightly. They just needed proof the bully could lose. Nearby, the new HOA chairman stepped onto a small stage with a microphone. Can I get everyone's attention? The crowd quieted. The chairman smiled warmly. Today isn't just about celebrating our neighborhood. He looked toward Marcus. It's about remembering what kind of community we want to be. Applause spread gently. The chairman continued. For years, fear kept good people silent. Then he pointed toward the crowd. But kindness, fairness, and courage brought this neighborhood back. Residents applauded louder. Marcus looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. He never liked being the center of things. Undercover officers rarely do. Then a little girl approached him holding a marker. Can you sign my police notebook? She asked shyly. Marcus laughed softly. You sure? She nodded excitedly. My dad says you're the reason bad people got caught. Marcus crouched slightly and signed a notebook. Then he smiled. Your dad's partly right. The girl frowned. What do you mean? Marcus pointed around the park. All these people help too. The child looked confused. Marcus explained gently. Bad people stay powerful when good people stay quiet. The little girl thought carefully, then nodded slowly. As the sun began setting over Willow Creek, Marcus walked toward his Charger, the same car that accidentally exposed an entire network of HOA corruption. Funny how life works sometimes. One arrogant decision by Karen revealed years of abuse hidden behind perfect lawns and fake smiles. Marcus leaned against the car quietly. A neighbor approached carrying 2 sodas. You planning to stay in Willow Creek? The man asked. Marcus looked around thoughtfully. Honestly, he wasn't sure before. Undercover work meant moving often, changing identities, keeping distance. But this neighborhood felt different now. Real. Marcus smiled slightly. Yeah, he answered. I think I might. Across the park, residents laughed together beneath glowing string lights. Children chased each other across the grass. And for the first time in years, Willow Creek actually felt safe. Not because of HOA threats, not because of fines, because the people finally understood something Karen never did. Communities become stronger when people protect each other instead of controlling each other. Marcus opened the Charger door, then paused for one final look across the peaceful neighborhood, a place once ruled by fear, now rebuilt by courage, all because one HOA Karen tried repoing the wrong car. The end.